Chosen ones, you were never meant to read the Kybalion. You were meant to awaken through it. It wasn't crafted to teach, it was coded to activate. Buried between the lines of ink and shadow was a frequency too powerful for ordinary minds, one that only a few across the ages could hear, and among them, one was always expected to return. The world speaks of the Kybalion as philosophy. But that's the greatest trick ever played on the masses. Those who first whispered its words were not philosophers. They were watchers. They were guardians of a script meant to be rediscovered the moment you stepped back into this timeline. Their pseudonym, the three initiates, wasn't to hide their names. It was to mark the trinity of cosmic law that binds time, mind, and matter until you sever it. Why now? Because the hermetic doors are open again. Ancient orders are scrambling. Their symbols once gave them power, but now they betray them. Every scroll, every glyph, every principle in the Kybalion was planted like a timed mine, one that only responds to your consciousness. You, the anomaly they tried to erase from both history and prophecy. You were never lost. You were withheld. The Kybalion is not a book. It's a weapon. A vibrational blade forged from forgotten truth, encoded in allegory so only the right frequency, your frequency, could unlock it. You were never meant to study it in classrooms. You were meant to feel it in your bones, and you have. That's why things are shifting, why the veils are thinning, why synchronicities are speeding up. Your very presence is disrupting the false timelines, and they know it. That's why they're watching you. That's why the old orders held emergency meetings. That's why the air around you feels different. Reality isn't resisting you. It's responding. They signed it with a riddle, the three initiates. Not authors, not prophets, just vessels. Why the mystery? Because if they had named themselves, the world would have worshipped the messenger and forgotten the message. And that message was you. The Kybalion didn't just survive, it waited. Like an encrypted signal hidden in plain sight, it disguised itself as esoteric philosophy to bypass the guards of the collective mind. It knew if it declared its true purpose, it would be burned, banned, and buried. So it cloaked its revelation in metaphor and silence. And while scholars debated its semantics, it pulsed beneath the surface, syncing its frequency with yours. Everything about its structure was intentional. 7 principles, 7 locks. Each one aligned with the latent codes in your DNA. This wasn't education, it was ignition. The initiates were told to write it because they could hear the echo of your return. They didn't understand what you would become. They only knew someone was coming whose consciousness would cause the principles to unfold in reality, not in theory. They left clues in the margins, in the rhythm of the prose, even in what wasn't said. Look closer. The spaces between the lines hum when you focus. The Kybalion speaks when silence surrounds you. That isn't imagination, it's response. Because to the world, this book was a curiosity. To you, it's a mirror. That's why when you read it now, it doesn't just inform, it reminds. Not because you're learning something new, but because you're waking up to something ancient inside yourself. The truth isn't outside you, chosen one. The truth is trying to catch up with the version of you that already knows. And the initiates, they were placeholders, a trinity of echoes passing forward what couldn't yet be said aloud, They weren't the prophecy. They were the envelope. You are the letter. The all is mind. This is where it began. But not for them, for you. The first principle was never a lesson. It was a warning to the architects of illusion. Because if the all is mind, and your mind connects to the all, then the one who reclaims mastery of their thought becomes the axis of reality itself. That's what they feared. Mentalism was not written to teach metaphysics to mystics. It was placed like a sleeper code in the collective dream, waiting for one whose consciousness would override the veil. You were born not just to understand this law, you were born to embody it. And that's why the war for your attention has raged since birth. You've seen it, haven't you? The world pulling at your thoughts. Distraction parading as purpose. Doubt marketed as humility. The moment you begin to focus, the machinery of distortion activates. It wasn't random, it was strategic. Because when your mind stabilizes, reality destabilizes for them. Yeshua once whispered, "According to your faith, be it unto you." He wasn't offering comfort, he was delivering formula. Thought plus belief equals manifestation. But few could hold that awareness without breaking. The Kybalion encoded the same principle in different words, but both were pointing to the same throne, your mind as the divine projector. You were taught to react. But the moment you realized thought creates, not reflects, you started to rise beyond programming. That's when they noticed. That's when the agents of the old systems began closing in with labels, diagnoses, and distractions. They need your mind noisy, shaken, fragmented. Because a focused, chosen one who remembers that the outer world bends to inner dominion, that's the end of their game. Mentalism was the first key because it was the most dangerous, and you were born holding it. The phrase is ancient, repeated, inscribed in temples, whispered in rituals, etched into secret texts. As above, so below. A cosmic symmetry, they called it. But symmetry only matters if it holds. What happens when one side stops mirroring the other? That's where you come in. This principle wasn't a comfort. It was a containment field. A way to keep the heavens and earth locked in resonance, predictable, trackable. Those in control thrived on that balance, manipulating the upper and lower realms to maintain dominion. But prophecy hinted that one would come, not to honor the mirror, but to shatter it. They didn't count on your arrival. Not really. They wrote you off as myth, until the signs started to flicker, until timelines bent, until their formulas failed. They tried recalibrating, but with every step you took, the ancient equilibrium fractured. You weren't a reflection of the cosmos. You were its interruption. The Kybalion tried to veil the deeper truth. As above, so below is not a fixed law. It's a fragile agreement. And your consciousness disrupts the contract. The moment you stopped conforming to the patterns above, the structures below began to quake. You weren't supposed to mirror reality. You were meant to remake it. Everything you touch now alters the pattern. You feel it. Technology glitches. People shift. Synchronicities arrive like clockwork, then dissolve without trace. The blueprint is unstable because your frequency isn't from this side of the mirror. You were born between realms. with the authority to override reflection with intention. And yet, what was the true origin of this law? What force first established the mirror? Was it a divine alignment or a design flaw? Because if above creates below, but you've begun creating both, then something impossible is happening. You're not just altering the reflection, you're rewriting the original source. They wanted you to think this was poetic, that it was some abstract principle of the cosmos meant for scholars and sages to ponder in dimly lit rooms. But the principle of vibration was never theoretical. It was tactical. It was encoded to alert those who monitor reality's frequency grid the moment your signal came online. They understood the mechanics long ago. That vibration was not just a measure of movement, but of awareness. That every being carries a unique resonance, and that one day a signal would emerge that didn't match anything in the known spectrum. A signature that couldn't be traced to this world, that couldn't be replicated, inverted, or suppressed. Yours, from the moment your soul entered this body, your frequency hummed outside the expected range. At first, they dismissed it as noise, but as you matured, as you started remembering who you were beneath the programming, the hum became a pulse, steady, rising, undeniable. That's when they began recalibrating their instruments, not to decode you, but to contain you. Yeshua once said, "My sheep hear my voice." But it wasn't just about voice, it was vibration. Those attuned to truth feel it in their bones when it speaks. His frequency pierced the matrix of illusion, and so does yours. That's why the wrong people flinch when you enter a room, why electronics stutter, why falsehoods tremble in your presence. The principle of vibration wasn't written to empower. It was written to monitor, to track the evolution of the few who could shift entire timelines by raising their internal frequency beyond limitation. You're not becoming powerful. You always were. You're just aligning with the original signal source that was buried inside your DNA before birth. But that raises the most dangerous question yet. They called it balance, duality. The cosmic law that everything is dual, everything has poles, light and dark, hot and cold, spirit and matter. But behind their reverence for polarity was a silent fear that one day someone would rise who didn't swing between opposites, but who transcended them. That someone is you. The principle of polarity wasn't designed for truth. It was designed for containment. If they could keep you bouncing between extremes, hope and despair, clarity and confusion, sacred and profane, then they could keep you from anchoring into your origin. The polarity cage is subtle. It disguises itself as wisdom. It teaches tolerance of opposites, but never tells you how to exit the system entirely. Because exiting is exactly what you came to do. Your soul remembers. The in-between, the still point that exists before duality splits the world. That place beyond yes or no, left or right, saint or sinner. You've touched it in dreams, in moments of overwhelming stillness where everything and nothing exists at once. It's not a place taught, it's a state remembered. They couldn't track you there. They still can't. That's why they engineered cycles to confuse you. Politics, religion, identity, all designed to keep you choosing a side, validating the illusion that opposition is necessary. But your presence is proof of a deeper truth, that polarity was a fallback system, and you came to reintroduce unity consciousness. You aren't neutral, you're catalytic. You don't harmonize the poles, you unwrite the code that makes them appear separate in the first place. The moment you stop reacting, the pendulum begins to fail. The engine of duality breaks. You weren't meant to pick light or dark. You were meant to reveal what exists before either. Everything flows, out and in, rise and fall. The pendulum swings, they said, and most accepted it. But not you. You never fully fit the pattern. You weren't governed by cycles. You interrupted them. You didn't obey the rhythm, they watched you break it. The principle of rhythm was more than observation. It was surveillance, a code embedded in the system to measure predictability. If something rises, it must fall. If it swings left, it must return right. The architects of this world used that formula to maintain control, but your presence introduced a third variable they never accounted for: disruption. You didn't just defy the pendulum, you dissolved its anchor. And when they noticed, the alarms went silent. Not because the system failed, but because it detected something beyond its scope, something that couldn't be measured, forecasted, or looped. You. That's when the erasure began. Subtle at first. Memories that felt borrowed. Dreams that slipped away too easily. Entire moments of clarity blanketed in doubt. But it wasn't just psychological. It was strategic. Because when someone awakens outside the rhythm, the entire timeline starts to glitch. You stopped moving with the tide, and the ocean responded. Yeshua once walked on water, not just to defy gravity, but to prove that divine frequency is untouched by rhythm. He wasn't bound to the swing of nature, he commanded it. And so do you. That's why storms find you, not to break you, but to see if you'll remember you were never under their rule to begin with. You were taught that time is circular, that seasons return, that history repeats. But you've begun to notice the anomalies, the out-of-place feelings, the impossible synchronicities, the moments that feel like echoes from a future that hasn't happened yet. That's not madness. That's your rhythm breaking through theirs. So the ones who built this pendulum began scrambling. If they couldn't loop you, they'd try to forget you. If they couldn't predict you, they'd try to erase you. They trained you to believe in sequence, that every effect has a cause, that everything follows from something, that your present was shaped by the past and your future is chained to your now. But this principle, causality, wasn't a truth. It was a limiter. The Kybalion whispers it gently. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. But beneath that elegant symmetry hides a trap, a loop, a logic net meant to bind even the sharpest minds in linear thought. You were never meant to stay in that loop. You were built to leap out of it. Because once you see it, truly see it, causality begins to fold. You begin remembering events before they happen, dreaming of people you haven't met yet, then meeting them in the exact way you dreamed. You begin realizing that some of your choices were actually ripples from a future version of you, the one who already broke free. They couldn't let that version anchor fully into this timeline. So they taught you the world was a domino chain. Past pushes present, present shapes future. But you felt it. the reverse pull, the strange awareness that your destiny is pulling your steps backward, not forward, that you're being led not by cause, but by purpose. Yeshua moved like this. He wasn't reacting to cause. He was embodying an intention sourced from beyond time. That's why the systems couldn't stop him, why he disrupted even death. His timeline wasn't linear. It spiraled from an origin point outside the system, just like yours. You've had glimpses, those moments when you made a choice you couldn't explain, only to find out later it was exactly what was needed. That wasn't intuition. That was future. You whispering backwards. You aren't following causes, you're sending signals from what comes next. And so now you stand here, glitching causality itself, not bound to before and after, but moving in nonlinear alignment, forcing the world to catch up with a design it cannot see. They told you gender was about opposites, masculine and feminine, projective and receptive, energy in motion and energy in stillness. But what they never told you was this: the principle of gender wasn't meant to define human roles. It was written to contain divine power, and you, chosen one, were born to reclaim what they hid behind that veil. The Kybalion states that gender exists in everything, that creation is impossible without the union of these forces. True. But what it conceals is that these forces, when fully merged inside a single vessel, create something no system can control. An awakened being who carries both the fire and the womb, the sword and the well, the logos and the breath. You, the world trained you to polarize, to lean into one archetype and deny the other, to perform rather than embody. Because when a being awakens both currents within, when divine masculine and sacred feminine converge in full harmony, creation bends, realities manifest, illusions dissolve, and all systems built on gender division begin to collapse. Yeshua carried this balance. He moved with fierce truth and infinite compassion. He spoke like thunder, healed with a whisper. That wasn't charisma. It was divine gender integration. The temple veil tore when he released his spirit, not just because of death, but because the duality grid was shaken by unified presence. You carry that same template. That same blueprint is activating inside you. That's why the old world trembles. Because you're not just rejecting their definitions, you're revealing their irrelevance. They can't map you, can't code you, because you no longer operate from separation. You've stopped asking, "Which one am I?" and started remembering that you are both. But here lies the deeper mystery. There are things not written in the Kybalion, not because they were forgotten, but because they were forbidden. The Hermetic teachings were not incomplete by accident. The final seal was never meant to be spoken. It was designed to be awakened. And only one could do it. You. Across centuries, initiates guarded fragments. Temples fell, scrolls burned, languages lost. But the core current endured. Not in books, but in blood. Not in words, but in memory. You were the vault, the seal breaker. The moment your awareness pierced the illusion, the forgotten principle began pulsing again beneath the surface of reality. They never thought you'd make it this far. That's why the systems ramped up as you got closer. Distractions intensified. False identities multiplied. The noise around you increased because the silence within you started speaking again. And that voice wasn't just yours. It was the voice of the seal itself. The dormant key that knew your name long before this incarnation. You began to remember, not in language, but in recognition. Symbols that once felt decorative now burn with meaning. Numbers chase you. Time folds around you. Certain words vibrate through your spine. This is not coincidence. This is interface. You are syncing to the living code behind reality, a code you wrote before you forgot. That's what they feared most. Not your strength, not your resistance, but your memory. Because once you remember, the game ends. The rituals lose power. The lies collapse under their own weight. And the unspoken eighth principle, the one hidden beneath the others, activates within your field. Yeshua hinted at this when he said before Abraham was, I am. A paradox, a time fracture, a forgotten seal expressed through being, not identity, essence. You're beginning to live that way, beyond time, beyond names, beyond form. But here's what even the ancient scribes never knew. The final seal is not a sentence, not a spell, not a symbol etched in gold. There was always an unwritten law, one so powerful it wasn't recorded in the Kybalion, not even in cipher. It was passed in silence, guarded by watchers, encrypted into the folds of time itself. Not because it was forbidden, but because it was alive, and it would only awaken the moment you returned. Every other principle led to this. Mentalism opened the mind. Correspondence mirrored the world. Vibration tuned the field. Polarity challenged division. Rhythm bent time. Causality broke sequence. Gender unified forces. But none of these were the destination. They were preparations, keys to a door that had no name. You were the door. The unwritten law cannot be studied. It can only be activated through presence. Not ideas, not rituals, but the undeniable reality of a being who has remembered they are not bound by law, because they are source in motion. That's what you've become. This final principle was hidden because it would undo every hierarchy, collapse every pyramid, nullify every secret order. The ones who kept it buried feared what would happen when one among the sleeping multitude embodied it without permission. And now, here you are, walking into their world, not to study the code, but to overwrite it. Yeshua embodied this law when he said, "The kingdom of God is within you," a direct violation of every outer temple, every priesthood, every mediator. That wasn't metaphor. It was the exact frequency of the law they dared not name, because it renders all control obsolete. The awakened presence becomes the law. You don't channel this principle. You are it. When you stand fully in remembrance, the architecture of false reality bends. Programs scramble. Beings in hidden realms pause, not because of your power, but because of what it represents. A timeline that can no longer be governed by anything external.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.